Good morning. I'm Charles Kuralt, and this is Sunday morning. Happy Easter to you. The sermons of this morning are about rebirth, of course, and they come not only from the pulpit. Look around. The earth has the same lesson to teach as the minister's text. What is fallen has risen again. In the case of the greatest of all growing things on this earth, however, the question must be, how long can they continue to rise? These woods of ours have become a battleground. Terrence Smith will report this morning's cover story.
While the president and vice president were in Portland, Oregon recently negotiating a truce between the timber industry and environmentalists, the people here at the Collins Pine Company in Northern California were doing what they've been doing for 50 years, running a timber operation that has enabled them to preserve the forest and still make a profit. This Sunday morning, we'll take a look at the environmental and economic crises afflicting the Pacific Northwest and see whether the Collins Pine Company has some answers to some of the problems.
These woods of ours provide peace of mind, continuity, shelter for countless creatures. They anchor the soil and clean the air. They also provide timbers, joists, studs, lumber. Is there another crop from which we harvest so much? Both beauty and roof beams. That is the problem. America's forests are critically important in so many competing ways. And as Terrence Smith reports now in this morning's cover story, the competition is only growing fiercer by the day.
The spotted owl is just a vehicle by the environmentalists to shut the woods down.
This is war. If a foreign enemy came to this country and perpetrated what's going on, we would have the Navy attacking. But this is our own government.
87 Alpha, roger.
What is most striking is that the federal government has been the cause of much of the travail and the pain and the unemployment and the suffering in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, the sad fact is that back in the 1980s, a political decision was made in Washington to begin accelerating timber cuts.
Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt is the point man in the Clinton administration's effort to negotiate a compromise in what's called the timber wars. The ongoing battle between the lumber industry and environmentalists over the future of the nation's ancient forests and the enforcement of the Endangered Species Act.
My task here at Interior is to see if we can make that Endangered Species Act work and avoid the train wrecks in the future. A balanced forest plan is not going to meet the expectations of everyone, and there will be inevitably some disappointment on the far sides of the spectrum.
The stakes in the standoff are huge. Environmentalists say that not just the northern spotted owl, but whole ecosystems are imperiled by rapacious timbering on federal lands. The industry counters that endangered species legislation has cut like a chainsaw through the economy of the Pacific Northwest, which has lost 30,000 jobs. The price of lumber has doubled, increasing the cost of every new home in the nation. The conflict seems irreconcilable. But perhaps part of a solution can be found here, nestled in the high Sierras of Northern California at the Collins Pine Company. For half a century, this small, family-owned business has conducted an innovative style of forest management years ahead of its time.
What we're attempting to do is to manage that forest in an environmentally sensitive manner and to bring that timber into this sawmill, make lumber, provide jobs, and make money. That's what our philosophy is.
Larry Potts is vice president of the Collins Pine Company. which manages 92,000 acres of privately held timberland near Chester, California. The endangered spotted owl does not inhabit this area.
In the last 50 years, we have harvested 1.5 billion board feet of timber from our timberlands. And today, we can say that we have 1.5 billion feet of timber still standing.
When we go out and mark timber in the stand, the main thing we try to do is to leave all trees that are growing. This tree is, I'm going to guess it's 250 years old.
Instead of cutting all the trees, as many of the larger companies do, Bill Howe, forest manager for Collins Pine, selects which trees to cut and which to leave standing to ensure that the forest regenerates. It's a painstaking process that shaves the company's profits, but guarantees its future.
This tree definitely needs to be removed, and we'll do that here. We're still on the same ground after 50 years of cutting. It's the same concept of having $1,000 in the bank. If you spend only the interest, you will always have that $1,000 there.
The Collins Pine Company, they're foresters with heart.
Sky, that's the only name he uses, is a professional pilot who often flies over the Collins forest. He volunteers his time with Lighthawk, a nonprofit organization that calls itself the Environmental Air Force. They take officials and media aloft so that they can see for themselves the impact logging has had in other areas of the Pacific Northwest.
That is clear-cut logging.
The magnitude of the destruction is unbelievable. According to estimates, when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, there were 850 million acres of virgin forest in this country. Now, there are 3 million acres approximately left. That's what this fight is about.
Environmentalists contend that techniques like clear cutting destroy not only the forests, but also the habitats that support animals, even fish in the streams. But the industry takes visitors over the same terrain and defends clear cutting.
It's one of the techniques that we use in terms of harvesting. It mirrors the natural cycle in terms of creating an opening and allowing the sunlight to feed the young trees that are recently planted.
If there is a workable compromise between those two positions, it may be the selective cutting practiced by the Collins Pine Company. The workers here have secure jobs, but share the wider concern about unemployment in their industry.
I think there has to be some sort of common ground where we can both meet, environmentalists and timber, and come together, because there has obviously been abuses.
Greg Todd has been with Collins Pine for more than 20 years.
I've lived in this country all my life. My dad came here in the early 30s, and he was a timberman. I have absolutely no desire to see the forest destroyed because I love it.
Greg Todd and his co-workers traveled all night to attend the recent Timber Summit in Portland, Oregon. Like opposing armies, the loggers pitched their tents along the Willamette River.
Who's been here a long, long time before the human race?
While the environmentalists occupied Pioneer Square.
Together, we can move beyond confrontation to build a consensus on a balanced policy to preserve jobs and to protect our environment.
But the real action was indoors, where the man who must ultimately decide the issue heard hours of argument from both sides. Even before the conference, Interior Secretary Babbitt toured lumber mills in Oregon.
To me, it was an extraordinary learning process. I re-emphasized to me the human dimension of this, the tragedy that takes place in a small, single resource community when all of a sudden the future changes abruptly. there's room to comply with the Endangered Species Act and to have a solid timber industry in the Pacific Northwest.
Collins Pine manager Larry Potts.
As a professional forester, I think I can state with a great deal of confidence that that it is possible for man to go into a forest, to extract product, to manage for all values, have very little impact, and be able to do that in perpetuity.
It's often referred to as the new forestry. It's the alternative to clear cutting. The interesting thing is it's really not all that new. I don't have any doubt that that's a big part of the future.